Hi, my friend, Caleb Johnson here, and I have a huge question to ask you, real estate investors. How would you rate your level of personal discipline on a scale of 1 to 10? If your answer is anything less than a 10, I've got something neat for you. And let me tell you, discipline means pushing yourself beyond your comfort zone and doing things that are difficult and sometimes boring. Achieving massive success requires you to do those difficult things. Building your levels of personal discipline is not easy, but it does pay off. In fact, you can't achieve anything significant without discipline. Now, I just released a program for investors where I walk with you as an accountability coach to aid you stay on track so you can push yourself to do the hard things that greatness is going to require of you. Starting is easy. Go to redcapitalgroup.com and click accountability coaching at the top right of the screen. So let's get to work, and now to the interview. Welcome back, everyone. My name is Caleb Johnson, host of From Trial to Triumph. This is the show where I speak with people who have gone through tremendous trials and they have come out triumphant. And even if you don't have the same story as our guest does today, that's okay, because you can still learn from their learning lessons and apply them to your life. And I'll do my best to bring those lessons into full view. So with that, today our guest is Travis Chappell. So Travis, how are you?
Hey, what's up, dude?
Hey,
What's going on?
living the dream, man. Well, I'm really excited to have you on the show. And can you go ahead and give our listeners just a quick background story about yourself and kind of your journey and to be successful?
Sure, man. So grew up in Southern California, went to a Bible college. Then I think like a lot of people, when I was graduating, realized I didn't really want to do the thing that I was getting a major in. So, graduated with a double major in Bible and church ministries. And it's, already a fairly, useless degree in terms of like career opportunities. But then once you add to the fact that that degree happened to also be unaccredited, it was just kind of like, okay, so this is really completely as like worth as much as the piece of paper that it's printed on, essentially. And the options at that point was just like go work a desk job somewhere for 30 grand a year working for somebody I didn't respect who told me what to do and when to show up and all that, or get into sales. And so that's what I did. I did door-to-door sales because that's what I did in college to make a little extra money. And so I did 100% commission door-to-door sales for 4 or 5 years, and then eventually wanted to get into making money online. Basically got to the point in my life where I realized that what I was really after was freedom, not money. That it was a matter of financial freedom, time freedom, and location freedom. And I thought that you could have one of those things and not have the other things, and then still not have real freedom. And true freedom to me is having the combination of all those things, doing what I want, when I want, with who I want. And I realized I didn't have really any of those except for potentially. I was working 100% commission, pretty flexible sales job. I could work when I wanted, when I didn't want to, but if I didn't work, I didn't get paid. So if I went to the Bahamas for 7 days and I came back, that means that I went 7 days without making money. So I had to get back out there and make up for the time that I was gone. And there was always, all these flaws with all these different, ways of making money. So I wanted to figure out how to do that online, because online to me seemed like the most scalable way to be able to do that, because I could do that from any country in the world and still be able to travel, still make good money, and kind of check off all of the boxes. And plus I was a millennial, and I was like, I should probably figure out something about this online world because I didn't know anything about it. So podcasting was kind of my foray into that space. I was a consumer of podcasts, and at the time, when I was kind of in that exploratory phase where I was like, look, my degree is useless, and the thing that I'm good at, which is door-to-door sales, I don't want to do forever. So I was really back at, starting over at that point, except for when most people start over when they're 23, they can just, maybe move back in their parents' basement or like couch surf with their buddies for a while or something. But I got married at 21. And I bought a house at 21. So I had a mortgage to pay, and I had, insurance and phone bills, and, I had all the bills of a, regular adult. And I was responsible for somebody else besides myself. And so it wasn't really the option of just like kind of hang out for a while until I figure it out. And so it was just kind of like came up against a wall. And the only way I knew how to get out of that was to go search for additional information that maybe I didn't have. And that was the first time in my life that I started consuming books, audiobooks, all that kind of stuff, YouTube even, and then came across podcasts for the first time. and started listening to a ton of podcasts. I like the medium. I'm not a big reader. I mean, I say that I don't enjoy reading as much as I enjoy listening to things. And so, if you would have asked anybody that knew me growing up if I was a reader, they would just like laugh in your face and because I was so opposed to it. I hated reading before. But something interesting happens when you actually start like caring about the content. I think that's what really happened to me is that I finally started reading, consuming books and material and audiobooks and all that kind of stuff because it was actually really interesting to me. And I like the podcasting format. I like audiobooks as well. But I like that podcasting is just more conversational in style, but you can still get a lot of really good nuggets out of it. Whereas, the audiobook, I feel like I have to be constantly fully attentive to the audiobook or I'm missing something and I'm going to miss something that won't stack in a later chapter or something like that. Whereas a podcast interview is like, you can turn it on and you can be at the gym, you can be in the car, you can be cleaning in the house, you can be doing a number of different things and still have it on and still be listening and still, gaining good information, and not worrying about if you missed this piece or that piece or whatever. So I like the medium and decided, hey, why not start my own show? I saw that other people were making money with it. And started in the podcasting space. And that was about 5.5 years ago now. And then from there, it's just been a search of how to turn that into money. Because when I first started, it didn't make any money at all. And I had no idea how to turn it into money. And I was still doing door to door to pay the bills and pay for all the additional expenses that the podcast was incurring as well. So after a few months, I made like my first $1 ever, in the online space. And it kind of taught me that, okay, this is real and this is actually pretty powerful. And it was basically, I just had this guy, I was doing what I was taught to do. And I did free phone calls for anybody that was listening to my show just to get to know people and see what their problems and obstacles were. And then I was like, you know what, I'm going to put together a course. I'm going to sell that course for, I don't know what it was at the time. I don't know, $250 or something like that. It wasn't much, $200 bucks, $250, somewhere in there. I don't know. And jumped on a call with a few people. And this one guy I jumped on a call with, I was like, yeah, I'm thinking about building out this course for networking or for something. I don't even remember what the course was about. Probably networking though, because that was what my show was about. And he goes, oh, cool. How much is it going to be? I was like, oh, I was thinking like $250, whatever it was. And he goes, oh, well, check your phone. And I looked at my phone and he had PayPal'd me the money for the course before I even created it. And I was like, oh, that's the power of an audience. Like this person sees enough value in the content I've done for free that they were willing to pay me for something that I haven't even created yet just because they know it's probably going to be good if all the free stuff I'm putting out is good. So it was a big lesson in that first $1 that I made. I ended up turning it into a mastermind instead of a course. It was like $1,000 mastermind. I was calling him to be like, hey, I'm going to give you your money back because I'm not going to create the course. I'm going to do this mastermind. It's going to be $1,000 instead of $250. And instead of asking for the money back, he sent me another $750 and became one of the members of my first mastermind. So that, again, was a big lesson for me. And it just taught me that it was possible. It's like, oh, I just made money online. That's crazy. How do I continue doing this? And then from there, it just kind of became a journey. I started doing podcast coaching for folks who wanted to start podcasts, did consulting and then coursework and then masterminds and events. And then COVID happened. I shut down masterminds and events and we started building a software, and then software sparked the need for a high ticket agency. And so now we have the software, we have the agency, we're getting back in education and masterminds. And I also have my own podcast, and that's been for, almost 6 years now.
Wow. Love it, man. And it sounds like for the last 6 years, you've really been busy, and that's great to hear. And when you first, I love that revelation that you had when you first made $1 online. And so now if someone wants to replicate that and do what you did, I guess, what are you doing now that you're teaching people to be able to, let's say they have a podcast and they want to start making money from that? How do they do that?
Yeah, you got to get clear about what you want first and why you want it. There's a lot of different ways to make money on a podcast, but if you're not really clear about what way you really want to be successful, then it's going to be really difficult to parse through the opportunities that are available. And all of them take work and effort. So I'll say this: if you're thinking that you're going to make a full-time income from sponsorship revenue, that's going to be probably the longest tail to the longest path to freedom. is through just regular sponsorship revenue, unless you're sitting on a ton of money. But for the sake of this conversation, I'm assuming we're talking about somebody who was like I was, like you don't have a lot of money, you don't have, you're already pretty busy, and you have this podcast, and you're not sure if you're going to keep doing it or if you're going to stop doing it, and you have 233 downloads an episode, and it's not enough to monetize, it's not enough to get sponsors, and so you're wondering what to do with it at this point. And frankly, I mean, part of it's just kind of limited mindset, limited beliefs. Like you could probably go get a sponsor if you found somebody that was like a perfect fit that would sponsor the show. That's kind of the importance of niching down too. The more niche you are, the easier it is to find sponsors that are willing to pay higher, CPM than a regular sponsor would. But then secondarily, what I would say is like, if you don't care you're making money, you just want to make money because you're sick of working your job and you want to make money online, and you don't care, like you'll do whatever it takes type of a thing, then really what I would really recommend to anybody with a podcast is starting some sort of business on the back end of the podcast, typically something related to the podcasting space, meaning that you're going to start producing people's podcasts for them. You're going to start editing people's podcasts for them. I would start with something really tangible like that. Don't get into, I guess you could get into, you could do coaching or something, but you just want it to be for something that you have some expertise in. So if you're, if you have a podcast about business because you want to learn about business, but you've never ran a business, then probably don't offer business coaching. But if you have had a podcast for 2.5 years and you know how to set it all up, you can charge for podcast coaching. Because you can teach people how to do their podcast. You may not be able to charge as much as somebody else might be able to charge because maybe somebody else has a lot better results and they can charge more for their time. But you can charge something to someone, like somebody's interested in learning that knowledge and they don't want to go on YouTube to learn it. So they'll pay you, $1,000, $2,000. My first ever podcast coaching client paid me $1,500, I want to say, for 8 weeks of coaching or something like that. Mm-hmm. And now I don't do any sort of coaching for less than $15,000. So it just becomes a matter of charge the first person, get that person results, have results to show for your work, increase your prices a little bit, get the next person in, show some results. If you can keep, replicating and showing results, then moving upstream and increasing your prices really just depends on the type of clientele that you can get in touch with, because, it's all about the value exchange. People with a lot of money will see a lot more value in your knowledge if you have proof, you have results, and you've actually done it yourself. And they're willing to pay a lot more than people who don't have any money would be willing to pay. So my point is there's lots of ways to do it. The main one that most people are familiar with is sponsorships, and that's just going to take the longest time. So if that's really what you're banking on and your show isn't growing organically right now, like you're going to have to spend money on growing the audience on your show. And if you don't have any extra money, you're not going to be able to outspend the growth. So you're going to have to start some sort of a third party income stream to come in so that you can spend money on the growth of the show. That becomes the trick at that time. Like if you've never had any money before and then you start this social media agency or podcast editing agency or coaching business, and then all of a sudden you're making $7,000 a month and you're used to making $3,500 a month, your temptation is going to be to go buy some Gucci shoes and go buy a Rolex and go buy all this other stuff. But really you just got to be disciplined enough to just say, nope, I'm investing into my future. I'm investing into the growth of my show. And you take all your profits that you make, you subtract all the expenses it takes to run the business, you take your net profit and you dump it directly back into advertising your podcast for increased listenership and download numbers so that you can eventually go get sponsorships. And once you get sponsorships and you're making $1,500 a month, plow 100% of the money you're making on sponsorships, maybe beyond the cost that it takes you to run your show, right? If it takes you $600 a month to pay an editor, whatever, then take that $900 additional and put it directly back into advertising the show and getting more downloads, and then continue to take profits from your business and put them into getting more downloads. And then eventually, after a year, 2 years, 3 years, depending on how much money you're allowed to put into it or can put into it based on the growth of the show and based on how much money you're making in your business, then it becomes okay, now I'm making enough money just on the podcast where I don't have to work. Quit your full-time job, become a full-time podcaster. Then you can decide whether or not you want to scale the business, or you want to just let the business pump out a smooth $100K a year and you're making another $3K a month in profit, but somebody else kind of runs it and they do their thing. And then you're just a full-time podcaster making $6K a month, selling sponsorships or whatever. And it's like, oh, cool. Now I'm making 70 grand a year doing exactly what I want from wherever I want, whenever I want. I get to talk to interesting people. It's not a bad way to make a living. It's just that most people aren't willing to go through everything that I just said. You know what I'm saying? They think it's just going to be like, oh, I start a podcast and then in the next, 3 months, I'm going to become Logan Paul. And it's just like, nah, it's not going to work out for you.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm glad that you said that. And you said so many great gold nuggets there, Travis. But the one thing that I want to pull out for the listeners is that you said, if you want to start a course, you need to first focus on providing value, right? And focus on getting them results, because so many people think that you're going to, like you said, have a podcast for 3 months and turn into Logan Paul. But that takes years. Decades to get to that level. And no one talks about what that looks like from 3 months to a decade out. But I think what part of that is, well, especially when you're coaching someone, being able to get them results. And that's a huge key. That's key. And Travis, you talked about sponsorship, and I don't think we'll talk too much about that, but I want to define what is a sponsor.
Yeah, so a sponsor would just be somebody that is paying you to tell your audience about their product, service, offer, business, book, whatever. That's all a sponsor is. It's just somebody else that's paying you for the attention that you have. In that case, like, you're always building a product. It's just that most of the time people's products are their service and their business, or a physical product that they're actually selling to a consumer. In media, your product is the content. So podcast, your product is your content. CNN's product is their content. It's their shows. Netflix's product is their original content. That's their product. That's their real product. You know what I mean? So my point is, you're creating a product either way. So people want to get it like, well, I don't want to be a business owner. I don't want to create a product. Okay, well, maybe stick to your 9 to 5 and don't try anything else then. Because starting a podcast is by itself starting a business. The skills might be different. You may not, even if you have a podcast bringing in 25 grand a month, you may not need a team of, 12 people to help you deliver on that. You have a VA or two and you're pretty set. But you still got to learn stuff about running the business. You're still going to have to start an LLC. You're still going to have to file taxes as an S corp. You're still going to have to do things that a business owner does. So you're going to have to step into that mentality at some point. And you are going to build a product, even if you're not building a physical product or even building a service. Your product becomes your content. So your content has to be that much better than everybody else's if you're going to want to go get sponsors that are looking at your product and going like, hey, this is a good enough product for us to associate our brand with. And it helps us reach our ideal audience and helps us convert more of, our products and services to that audience. So yeah, you're always creating a product. You just have to decide, is my content the product, or is my product the product?
And I've also seen some people charge others to be on their show. Now, at what point do you see that being a viable solution that someone should do that?
You can do it from day one. It's just, you just got to be careful, man, because some people think that they're, bigger than they are, or they get this kind of sense of ego from the fact that they have their show, but then so they charge somebody, $1,000 to come on their show that gets 112 downloads an episode, and it's like, yeah, but that's what I think it's worth, and it's like, yeah, but that guest isn't going to make $1,000 back. So if you can do that and have a clean conscience, that's on you. It's just a matter of, like, at some point you're going to earn a negative reputation and people are going to stop paying you. So I'm a big fan of just like, look, charge what you can for a fair, like, exchange of services. You know what I mean? So, like, for instance, if you're getting 1,000 downloads an episode, I would recommend that you charge a CPM of $100, which is $100 CPM, cost per 1,000 impressions. So 1,000 downloads, $100 per 1,000 downloads. That means you're charging $100 for somebody to come on your show. If you also have a show where that person is coming out to your physical studio in person, and you have a video team that is collecting all of the content, and they're chopping it up and they're turning it into 15 reels and TikToks and YouTube shorts, and they're turning it into quotes, and they're turning it into an email for their email list, and turning it into all this other stuff, then it becomes almost like a content asset package. Well, that you can charge more than $100 for. You could probably charge $2,000 for that, even though your reach is really low, because of the additional value that you have that you're offering to that individual. So, it's not like there's like a magic number in terms of your reach that you have to hit in order to charge for it. It just means like whatever you're charging for, make it worth that person's time, because they're going to go tell other people about it. So they can either go tell their friends they had a great experience with you and bring you more business, even though it's less dollars per person, or they can go talk crap about how your show was too expensive and didn't do anything for them, which is most of the time what's happening, is that people are overcharging for their show because they think it's better than it is. It's not getting the guests any results, and then they get talked crap about to everybody else because they're just charging too much for their show, because it's just frankly not worth that much. So yeah, there's not really like a magical metric. It's just, if you're going to charge fairly, just like anybody else would. And don't be afraid to say no for the sake of saying no. Like if you have somebody that comes in, like if you're like, yeah, but I don't want to charge $200 because then anybody will pay to come on my show. Well, you don't have to say yes to everybody. You know what I'm saying? Like I always have like a yes list, a no list, and like a yeah, if you pay me list. You know what I mean? It's like it's like some people are just like, you're just not a good fit. Like you're just like if
right.
like a fiction author. It's just like, you're just not a great fit for my show. Unless you're really famous, then we can talk about like success. But if you're like an up and coming fiction author, and like, I haven't read your books, I'm not a fiction, like I don't read fiction ever. We're not going to have a super great conversation. You haven't achieved success on a massive level, which is the conversations I like to have regardless of the industry. And it's just like, we're not going to probably sell many of your books for you. Like, I am not going to read your books before I interview you. It's not going to be as good of a conversation. It's just not a great fit. Like, that's a no for us. Like I said, barring like J.R.R. Tolkien, like, yeah, okay, I'm going to bring her on my show. But yeah, like some people are just, it's just not a good fit, even if you're willing to pay me. Because you still have to maintain audience integrity as a podcast host. You can't just like sell out your show, or your audience will definitely be able to tell, and it'll start diminishing, and then you won't be able to charge as much. And that's like a collapsing business model. You don't want to do that. And then there's the yeses, and most of the time the like absolute yeses are people that we're reaching out to. It's very rare when like we're getting reached out to for the ones that are like absolute yeses. Now, at this point, it happens a lot more than it did when I started, because we have great relationships with publicists and talent agencies and things like that. So if somebody happens to have a book coming out and they're really well known, they'll reach out to us and be like, yeah, sure, we'll definitely, bring them on for an interview and help promote. But for the most part, it's like 80% of the definitely yeses. Those are us reaching out to our ideal guests and them saying yes. And then the last one would be all the people that are in between. It's like, yeah, this is kind of interesting. Yeah, cool. Like, you built an 8-figure business. That's great. But like, if I'm making the decision, I probably am not going to say yes to this, because I've had a bunch of like exactly your profile type of people on the show before. And there's nothing like crazy different about your story. Like, you didn't also climb Mount Everest or something like that. It's like, you got to find something interesting or differentiating, or else it's just going to be like another one of the 8-figure business owners, which I'm not trying to like down or like degrade and say like you're like not good. Like, that's fantastic, good for you, like you've been extremely successful, that's awesome. However, it's just not as interesting of an interview to me anymore, because I've had so many people on my show that have a very similar story to that. But if you're willing to pay X amount of dollars, then sure, we can have the conversation. You'll just sponsor that episode. Like, if it matters enough for you to get in front of my audience because you want to sell them something, okay, that's fine, but you're just gonna have to pay me to get access to my audience. And I think that that's a fair trade, because I've built the audience and you didn't. So like, it's a matter of like, we got the no's, you got the yeses, and there's a bunch of people that end up in between. And the pricing that you charge for those people might be different based on like how interested you are in the interview.
Now, Travis, how do you keep that audience integrity, if that makes sense? So how do you make sure the guests you're presenting to your audience stay in line with, I don't even know, how the people that you want on the show, if that makes sense?
How do you like filter through those people?
Right. So how do you focus on the best quality content for your audience, and maybe you can still generate income from that, but you're not going to give them a crappy conversation and crappy content?
Yeah, I mean, you just got to feel it out really, and maybe write down some metrics that matter to you. Yeah, for me, it's always a guest by guest basis. You know what I mean? It's just like some people maybe just are more interesting and some people are less interesting, or some people are more connected in this space, some people are less connected in this space. Like, is it overall beneficial for us to bring this person on, or is it like super neutral, or does it make us look worse? Like, I'm never going to bring anybody on that I just am like wanting to like just because they're willing to pay, I guess is what I'm trying to say. I'm never going to bring anybody on just because they're willing to pay. Like, you have to also have something interesting, or like something, something that you're doing that I want to talk about on the show, or something that sets you apart. I'm not just because you're willing to pay doesn't mean you're going to come on my show. Just because, some people are also scam artists, and they have really sketchy businesses that they overcharge for something that I know that the audience can get somewhere else for 1/10 of the price, and it's just shady industries. So like, I'm probably not going to bring a lot of those types of people on my show. Really zero, a total of zero. I'll bring zero people on my show that I have any sort of like sketchy feelings about, or I'm just like, look, if you figured something out, good for you, but I just don't feel good pushing that to my audience. So no, you, like I said, as a podcast host, you know what your audience is going to want from you, and what they're going to look at as like, oh, you're selling out, or you're being disrespectful to our time. So just, be careful of those things. I would say more often than not, if somebody's willing to pay you, probably just take it. Most of the time that's going to be fine. But you just want to be careful, just like anything else.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm glad you said that, because that's one thing that I don't think of is being scammed. And right, so having a smaller platform compared to something that you've built up like yourself over years, I'm sure you've seen some of the bad along with the good. Hey guys, if you're enjoying the content of our podcast, but you have additional real estate investing questions, I'm happy to answer those questions for free. Head over to redseacapitalgroup.com and book an appointment with me. Not only am I the host of the show, but I am actively buying and already own properties across the US. So feel free to schedule a time that works best for you. Visit redseacapitalgroup.com to book your appointment today. Travis, switching a little bit, I know you've had the sales background to lead up to where you are today. And what were some of the challenges that you had to overcome in that development of your success of where you are today?
It's just the constant, reinvention, I guess, of myself. I still, ask me in a decade or two, maybe I'll have a better answer for this, but I still haven't figured out if it's really like a good thing about who I am, or a bad thing, or maybe somewhere in the middle. But I tend to, I guess, get bored with things, or I tend to just be done with something. And once I'm done with it, it's really difficult for me to force myself to continue doing it. And a lot of people can do that. Frankly, like I can't. I don't know how to not do it. And maybe it's because of all the things that I've attempted are always big risk and big reward. And so once I get numb to the reward and I want a bigger reward, then I just drop it and go look for a bigger reward or something. And maybe just because it's not guaranteed either. It's like, for instance, when I stopped doing door to door, it was one of those things where I knew that if I hustled, like the product that I was selling at the time was paying me $3,000 to $5,000 commissions, and I could sell, 3 to 5 of those a week if I was knocking doors 25, 30 hours a week. I knew I could sell 3 to 5 of them a week. So like, I knew that I could make, $40,000 to $75,000 a month in commissions selling this product. But I was so done with door to door, and there's no way to half-ass it. There's no way where you can put in half the effort and get half the results. You put in half the effort, you get 10% of the results or none of the results when you're like hunting for your food like that. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Like 100% commission, you can't. So my point is like, maybe if I did have like a cushy, comfortable 9 to 5 that was paying me $130,000 a year or something like that. And I had an air conditioned office with a decent view, and I had some status inside of that office, and, a couple people working for me. If that was the option versus like chasing my dreams and doing everything that I've done or reinventing myself, like maybe I would have stayed there because that would have been more comfortable. But it's been pretty easy for me to like pivot and move away and do different things. Because I never got too comfortable anywhere doing what I was doing. It was always like, well, if I was capable of doing this, I know I'm capable of doing that. So if the opportunity there is bigger, then it doesn't make sense for me to stay here in the long run. So, I always try to think about what's the long term. How does it affect my life? Not this year, but in 5 years from now, 10 years from now, 15 years from now, how does this decision affect my life at that point? And I think that's one thing I was always able to make decisions financially based on the long term, and I think that's benefited me in a lot of different ways. Because, like I said, it's never comfortable or fun to like reinvent yourself. When you feel like you've achieved status or respect in a certain industry or space or skill set, and people look up to you, and you've earned that over a few years, like I did with sales. At least in the circles that I was in. And then you move to a different world like podcasting, which are completely separate and totally 100% different. When I moved from there to there, I was starting over again. I was like the brand new sales rep starting off at 19 in college, like I did with door to door, instead of like the experienced 24-year-old door-to-door guy that had been doing it for 5 years and earned multiple six figures doing 100% commission door-to-door sales, that everybody in the office respected and trusted and asked advice from. I went from that to like brand new newbie podcaster, knew zero people, didn't know what I was doing, didn't know anything about it, didn't know how to make money, didn't know any of those things. And like, that's painful to do a lot of times. So when I, went from the podcasting world into selling masterminds, then I went from masterminds to building a software company, another huge reinvention of myself that was outside of my comfort zone by a factor of, 5 or 10. Like it wasn't even close to what I was comfortable or familiar with doing. And then, in embracing the marketing side of things, and then turning into a CEO, and then starting to hire people. Like every time that stuff happens, you shed a little bit of your previous self, and you step into a new version of yourself. And, it's not a very comfortable thing to do to yourself. And so that's why I think it's really easy for a lot of people to have those golden handcuffs. And it makes a lot of sense psychologically, because it's just like, man, if I work this business really, if you're making a $100,000 to $200,000 salary somewhere, I mean, it's going to take you like 3 or 4 unless you have a really solid connection to somebody who knows what they're doing, or you have a ton of outside capital, or you have like some ace in the hole, then it's probably going to take you 3 to 5 years to get your business to pay you as much as your salary is currently paying you. You know what I mean? After you pay employees, after you pay vendors, after you have marketing expenses, after you have everything, like it would be difficult to leave some of those things. So I commend and applaud anybody that's willing to do that and willing to kind of put themselves through the ringer at any point. But yeah, dude, I don't know. I just knew I feel like the one thing that I've always relied on, like I said, is just that long-term vision. It's just like, I know what I want my life to look like. And if I feel that the path that I'm on currently is no longer capable of taking me to the place that I want to become, or the place that I want to go, then, I'm done. And I switch to something else, even if it's painful and uncomfortable and uncertain.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, Travis, where do you see yourself then on that note? Where do you see yourself being in the next 5 to 10 years?
Yeah, dude. I mean, it's so hard to even, guess what the 10 years are going to look like. I always have a vision for what I want in life and how I want to like wake up and go throughout my day and everything. But I would say like the main thing for me has been a realization in the past few months of how much I really want to continue putting out content, and how much I really enjoy doing my podcast, how much I enjoy interviewing interesting people, getting really high quality conversations going with people. I just enjoy that part of what I do. And, a really good scenario for me in 5 years is like build the agency and software companies I'm working on right now, exit one or both of them, and then basically be a full-time creator at that point, where I have some money in the bank and I'm making enough I'm making a 7-figure income off of sponsorship revenue and Google AdSense on YouTube. Like that's a really, really good scenario for me. Because, I think the attention will allow me to start whatever I want to start at that point. But I know I have clarity around, like, I want to continue interviewing people and I want to continue, gaining audience size in that world. So I know that's the vision for where I'm headed, as like personally, and what I want to be doing with my time is just in 5 years from now, if 90% of my time was just doing interviews, traveling, speaking, and, doing some coaching or consulting or hosting a mastermind group or something like that, that would be sweet. And that's kind of what I have my eyes set on, regardless if we exit or we don't exit. That's why I'm bringing in an operator for my businesses, to help take some of that work off of my plate so I can focus on some of those things and realize that goal ahead of time. So, but I think one of the big things about clarity and about vision is being willing to constantly revisit and re-engage it and ask yourself the questions: is this still what I want? Is this still the path that I'm headed down? And is the destination still something that's important to me? So if you ask me that question in 2 years from now or 3 years from now, it may be different. But as of right now, that's where I see myself.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm glad you said that, because that really, I think that's motivating, especially to think where you were maybe 6 years ago into where you will be 5 to 10 more years. It really just, I think, gives perspective to think anything's possible.
Yeah.
You can start with one little podcast and be so ecstatic about making $200. And now you're going to exit your company at, a $10 million profit, and that could happen really quickly, but again, it kind of goes back to what happens within the middle of that time. So much work, blood, sweat, and tears, and perseverance. And a lot of people just aren't willing to do that.
Yeah, no, you're right.
So, well, Travis, I think we'll start winding things down here. I want to go ahead and ask you the 3 final questions. And the first being is, if you can recommend a book to our listeners, what would that be?
Oh man, there's so many good ones. I'm gonna go with The Vision Driven Leader by Michael Hyatt.
Okay, that's a good one. I haven't read that. What's the high level about?
Yeah, it's basically that. It's just like how to craft a vision for your business, but also could work for your life. But in terms of like organizational structure and leadership, I don't know anybody who speaks about it quite as well as Michael Hyatt does. And so I like how he breaks down your mission, your vision, your values, and how to think about those things, how important and how, not just important, I mean, crucial it is to running a successful organization, even if you're, just putting together a small team of people, even if you just got a couple VAs. Like, it's just important to have that vision set up. And so I think everything starts there. And if you don't have that correct, then a lot of other things won't be able to get there either. So yeah, it's a good one.
Yeah, that's good. And Travis, if people want to learn more about you and potentially work with you, where's the best place for them to do that at?
Yeah, TravisChappell.com, Chappell, TravisChappell.com. You get over there. My email's over there, social links, YouTube, podcast, everything's over there. So it's a good place to, it's kind of the hub. Then you can go wherever you want from there.
Perfect. And if you can share one final thing with our listeners that they can take away from today's show, what would that be?
My favorite quote, and one that I wrote on the top of my whiteboard, it was there for like a year before we moved, when I started my podcast, is "Be so good they can't ignore you," from Steve Martin. Mm-hmm. And just always, it's so simple. It's so simple, but being that good requires so much work that most people will never get there. And Steve Martin's a fantastic example of getting that good back when the only way to become successful in his space were through going through a ton of gatekeepers who had to see something in you. There was no YouTube or TikTok to get famous on and then leverage your way into television and film. It was one way and one way only. You know what I mean? And you just had to be that good. And Steve Martin was and is that good at making people laugh. So that quote always stuck with me, and I really like it. And I think that it's very fitting because it's always true. And Tom Bilyeu said it kind of similarly, but a different way. He said there's always room for the best, because Tom Bilyeu, grew a $1 billion protein bar company, which was, I don't know, in the 2010s at some point. They did it like 4 years or 5 years at Inc. 5000. They were number 2 on the Inc. 500 fastest growing companies list. They grew like 17,000% 1 year or something like that. Massive expansion, so fast. And I asked him about, why choose a business with so much competition? And he was like, there's always room for the best. And I was like, that's a really good point, which is very similar to be so good they can't ignore you. It's just like, regardless of what you do, how competitive, how many people there are in it, if you just become that good, people can't ignore you anymore, and you will find success in that field.
I love it. Travis, thank you so much for being here, brother. It really uplifted me, and I know it uplifted our listeners as well. So I appreciate your time for being here.
Absolutely. Appreciate it, man. Thanks for having me, Caleb.
Yep. All right, everyone. We'll catch you next time. Bye.
It's time to grab your victory. Find us on the web at redseacapitalgroup.com and follow us on Instagram and Facebook at Red Sea Capital Group.